So I want to talk to you about something today that is important to me, having given up drinking in the last 7 months. I'm 7 months clear of drinking, and that is the notion of the acceptable necessity of suffering. Now, before you start hitting me in the comments about that, try maybe changing that word suffering for burden, anything like that really. This burden we should be carrying when something like this happens to us, like an addiction. Now, I'm not talking about victimhood here. I'm no victim. I'm talking about a hardship, and it's one that has been caused by me. I understand that. I came out of the military after about 20 years. I was flying fast jets. I was teaching on fast jets. In fact, I was a bomber pilot. And I left during the time of COVID. During that time, I just kept plowing on drinking and ended up with dependency on it pretty much. And after, 5 years of struggling through that, the 1st of January this year, I kind of dropped that drink, and haven't drunk anything since the 1st of January. Now, when I talk about the acceptable necessity of suffering, what I mean by that is that burden that we need to carry on with us as we go through life, knowing that we've done something and that we're having to undo it. And it's a challenge. And I think maybe we need these challenges. And I want to talk to you about that today using two particular things. One is a story about my mum. All ears on that one, please, respectfully. And the other one is a quote from a film, which is Ridley Scott's Gladiator. This is quite important to me because near my house there's a tree. It's a yew tree, one of the oldest yew trees in the country, in fact. And when the Romans came into Britannia, as it was at the time, about 50 AD, it is a history lesson it seems, they were fighting the Celtics, of course, all the way as they came through Germania and into Britannia, and they reached the border of Wales pretty much, and it obviously was a bit wet there, and what are the Welsh now were a little bit nasty to them, and around about 380 AD, they decided to leave and go back home. All the Romans went back to Rome. And as they did leave Britannia and that bordered area where I live, this little tree started growing, this little yew tree started growing. And that yew tree now, which I can get to within about 20 seconds of leaving my front door, that yew tree is about 1,600 years old. That's some crazy stuff to think about. A tree that's 1,600 years old. Anyway, I think about this line in Gladiator, or the film Gladiator, sorry, when I think about this yew tree, I sometimes go and stand by that, and I think there are Romans here that detached from Rome, that come through Germania into Britannia, and as they left, this tree was starting to grow. Now, if you remember Maximus, who was played by Russell Crowe in the film Gladiator, Ridley Scott's film, he was supposed to be the chief general of Marcus Aurelius. Maximus was a fictitious character, but there is this scene where he is addressing the cavalry before the big battle in Germania with the hordes, as it were. And he says to these guys, he says, if you find yourself riding alone in green fields with the sun on your face, do not be troubled, for you are in Elysium and you are already dead. Now, I think about that a lot, especially when it comes to things like addiction, which I also see as choice, by the way. The notion of being reborn. I don't want to get too weird and spiritual here. We still got to talk about my mum. But with that in mind, Elysium, if you remember correctly, you might not know this, from Greek mythology, was the place, the heavenly place, their heaven in effect, where only the valiant and the most virtuous of people actually went. So these men that were fighting on these battlefields were looking forward, much like Vikings going to Valhalla, looking forward to the notion that they may end up doing something valiant and going to their Elysium. Now, I see people that have worked through addiction or gone through some kind of trauma, whether it be a death in the family, a breakup, a messy divorce, an awful job loss, anything where they've been on, the raggedy edge of, maybe not making it. I see those people as being in Elysium, like they're already dead. And I want to talk a little bit about that at the very end, the notion of being already dead. Because it doesn't matter now what you do, there's a massive freedom that comes with that. But of course we do have to carry this burden, this suffering that you have from a loss. I know it doesn't last forever, but I'll get to that in a second. It's a story about my mum and then I'll finish. My mum is a deeply religious woman. She's a Catholic woman. I'm a Catholic man. I haven't been to church, I hadn't been to church in about a decade. And about 2 weeks ago I was down in Devon at a place called Buckfast Abbey, near the town of Buckfast, in the town of Buckfast. My family have a history of helping to build the abbey back in the 1900s. Just so happens the abbey was built from the 1000s, but then it was taken down, it fell down, it rebuilt, fell down again. But from 1900 they rebuilt it, and it's an amazing place, really truly amazing place. And I'm down there, staying down there for a night. My mum says she's going to church, and she's not a well woman at the moment, my mum. She's 78, I think it is, late 70s. And I said, I'll come to church with you, mum. Son takes mum to church. Of course he does. That's what a son does, even though I haven't been to church for a long time. So I take my mum to church. And when I'm in this church, I'm in this mass, I'm thinking about this notion of suffering. And this psalm comes into, I'm thinking about this psalm that I used to, when I served on the altar, this psalm 23:4. You're probably familiar with it. I'm not getting all weird and religious on you now. Don't get me wrong. Take solace wherever you can find it. But this psalm says, you may well remember this: as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. That's a really interesting one. Because what it means is that when we do go through these really difficult times, when we do drop a substance, or we do go through a bereavement, or we have a huge job loss, or things are just like you're looking at the beams in your garage, and I've been there. So when I talk about alcohol and things like that, you know, people ask me to in the comments and stuff. I try and address it like I'm addressing it now with a few stories, a bit of humour maybe in. So I thought about that Psalm 23:4, and what that means is that there's always going to be someone there with you. You haven't got to fear it too much without getting all deeply religious and nothing like that. And I want to point you to the story of the footprints in the sand, which you've probably heard of. So I'm sorry if I'm going to tell you this, but I remember when I stopped drinking the 1st of January, really cliched, isn't it? The 1st of January. I never wanted to stop on the 1st of January, but over the 5 years, I just struggled. And when it got to the 1st of January, 2023, I just went, just do it on the 1st of January, dude. And the reason I said that was because there were so many other people also looking to stop drinking on the 1st of January. And I thought there's going to be some energy in the world there. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be a bit of people giving up together. I do it when I struggle in the gym sometimes, doing press-ups or something, or burpees. I'm thinking there's someone else, opposite side of the world, also struggling. Let me give that energy to them. Maybe they're going to give that energy back to me. You know how that is. So the footprints in the sand, there was a person, and they said to the Lord baby Jesus, the Lord, they said, look, God, if I give you my life and I follow you, you know, will you come with me, basically? And the God said, I'll always be there for you, man. That's it. Me and you walk together. That's a pretty cool notion. And so they did. They walked, this guy or girl, this person walked their life with Jesus next to them, as the story goes. And then when this person got to the end of their life, they looked back on the sand they'd walked through, and they saw that there were two pairs of footprints the whole time, except for the really low time in this person's life, the difficult time, the time where they just felt horrible, and things were going badly and everything else, you know, the really sad times in their life. And they turned to the baby Jesus. They turned to the Lord G, the top Lord G, and they said, how is it that you said you'd be with me the whole time? And yet the bad times in my life, when I look back, you weren't there. There's only one set of footprints. And the Lord turned around and said, well, it was during those times that I carried you. That's some tripping motherfucking shit. Man, that's crazy, isn't it? To think that there's someone there that when you really get down, you're going to be picked up. And people call that faith, and that's fine. And if you're not a religious person, and I am not a religious person, I'm a bit of both, they call it faith. We're all on a journey of discovery. It's not necessarily what you think it is. You know, take things from wherever you can. Listen to me, listen to other people, whatever it might be. But let's have a think about it. When you are at your wit's end, your lowest of the low, the lowest of ebbs, you can think that there's a community out there that are going to help you, lift you up, just by the knowledge that they're doing the same thing as you. And that's what I do with the whole not drinking thing. I think, hey, there's other people out there having a rough time too. I don't want to be that guy that lets them down. Does that make sense? So I'm going to do the best I can to say that I'm never going to be drinking again. There's other stuff out here, guys. There's a lot more out here. I have a lot of pilots write to me. Airline pilots seem to be suffering a lot for some reason, more than military pilots. I don't know why that is, but they do seem to be suffering a lot more than military pilots with alcohol. It could be the solitary nature of the job, but there's other people out there having a really rough time. It seems that alcohol is this one thing at the moment that's really gripping people. I'm trying to come out with a product that's helping people, kind of a community thing, because I know not everyone wants to be in my school. I understand that not everyone wants to be in the school. So I've got an idea to come out with something which hopefully will help everyone join and we can sort of, you know, drive people there. The other thing I want to say, guys, I'm not telling you to stop drinking. I don't care. You do what you want to do. I'm telling you about my story and how I address it. And I do address it in those kind of manners, in the manners that, you know what, you're going to carry a burden for a long time. For me, it's been 7 months, and there's sometimes some really dark times. It's just some really dark times. It just is. But we've got to occupy ourselves and distract ourselves a little bit. And hopefully those things make sense. The Elysium one, I'll just reiterate that. What if this Elysium wasn't a heaven you're waiting for? You haven't got to think about an afterlife, like when I die there's a heaven I'm going to go to. But it is that time, as I said earlier, that starts now. You stop doing something, this is your next life. You're being reborn. You can do whatever you want. You can get on a plane tomorrow, fly out to Berlin, live in a hotel for 2 or 3 nights. Yeah, you could live on credit cards. It doesn't matter. You could be dead. You know, you probably should be dead. Let's be honest, you probably should be dead. And the last thing I say is, remember about this, the other thing that Maximus said to his troops. He said, remember, he says, brothers, what you do today will echo in eternity. Let's just think about our lives and how we're going to continue those lives in different manner. And what does that mean? How are people going to remember us? Hey, I hope that works for you guys. I know it's only a quick 10 minutes or whatever, but hey, comments below. Let me know what you think about this. And it's a rambling thing, but you know, the acceptable necessity of suffering, the burden we have to carry in order to help others through, etc. Hey, I really appreciate it. Tim Davies, Fast Jet Performance.